And they destroyed a lot of sources. We found them at the Dead Sea Scrolls. There are many apocryphal writings, which means writings outside of the Hebrew Bible, mystical writings, talk about, ecstatic experiences, talk about mysteries. And I think sometimes that the secret gospels of Jesus come from that mystical Jewish tradition, which is thousands of years old, and which Christians said, well, that stuff is heresy. He would never have said that.
Right.
I don't know. He might have. I can't say he did because we don't know. But I think it's quite likely that if Jesus taught as other rabbis in the first century did, he would have taught secretly to people he felt were on a deeper level.
Interesting. Okay, back to Satan, and then we'll start to wrap things up, because I love this, by the way. You can tell that you have so much insight from reading the material and just immersing yourself with it, that and you're scholarly about it. You don't say this is you're very balanced in your approach on I'm not sure, or I know, or it's so Satan.
There's a lot we don't know. A lot we don't know. That's really true.
The Jews get vilified. We know this in the 2nd century. Early church fathers are literally vilifying them and saying, you Christ killers. But we see a turn take place here where now Christians are using the term Satan against one another.
Yes.
And do we see that in the New Testament? We see it used against the Jews, but is there hints of it in the New Testament with other gospels? Is Paul talking to Jews when he's talking about let them be accursed, or...
I don't think so. He's talking about people who do things that he thinks are despicable, like somebody living with his father's wife, or something like that, some kind of sexual...
Or circumcision on a Gentile, right? Like that?
That's a question. I don't know about that. That's the book of Acts.
No, Galatians, when he was saying
okay,
another gospel, and I figured it might have been... Anyway, sorry.
When he says, if somebody teaches another gospel than the gospel I teach, let them be accursed, who do you think he's talking about?
For me, I would say, I think it's the circumcisers. I think these people, but then again, he goes on to talk about, castrate yourself then if you're going to circumcise.
He's talking about Peter and James, most likely.
Okay, this is powerful.
Peter and James criticize him. And they say he didn't know Jesus at all. He never knew Jesus. Peter was Jesus's right-hand man, and James was his brother. And this Paul comes and says, well, I have a gospel to go to the Gentiles, and Jesus appeared to me up in the sky. And, Jesus had been dead by the time Paul said he saw him. And so they suspected that what he said wasn't true. And I think he's speaking about some people. You may think they're angels from heaven, but you know what? They're really not. I would curse them. He's very angry at Peter and James. That's the way I've understood that passage. Now, there are different ways to read it, I'm sure, because most Christians don't want to see Peter and Paul in conflict.
Because Acts mends them. But yeah, this is...
I mean, there's a lot that you have to sort of smooth out the story,
I think Paul does in Corinthians too call them super apostles.
Like yes,
he's
he does.
mocking them.
Oh yeah, those super apostles. I'm not like them, but I'm really better than they are because they haven't had the ascent to heaven that I was given.
Wow.
And they haven't had the revelations that I've had.
Do you think that when he said, I met a man once, he's talking about the moment that he received these revelations?
Yes.
Okay. Absolutely.
And he say, look, I've had revelations. He says it in 1 Corinthians 2. We have secret wisdom tradition. We know divine wisdom. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but yes, I do know what it is. And the Spirit taught it to me personally. And if you're not taught by the Spirit, you don't have it. I mean, Paul is pretty certain about his message being the only one you should really listen to.
Powerful. And that's the one that really takes over the backdrop of the Gospels in Mark. I really think Mark is utilizing a Pauline tradition. What do you think?
Yes, very likely, but so are the people who write these other gospels. They think of Paul as the great apostle, and they say what we care about with Paul is not just what he's written in his letters, but his secret mysteries. So there's an apocalypse of Paul among the secret gospels that talks about Paul's trip into heaven. There are other claims that Paul had secret mysteries, and we can tell you what they are. Those people can't tell you because they don't know. They just read what's written in the letters. We know the secret mysteries he taught. And the fathers of the church said, no, he didn't teach secret mysteries. He said himself that he did, but we know he didn't. And Jesus didn't either. Of course, they're ignoring Mark 4:12, 11 and 12, where Jesus says he's going to teach them privately. But the Orthodox line is that he never did that.
So let's mention the Gnostics and how Christians vilify one another before we exit.
Well, the Gnostics didn't call themselves that. They called themselves Christians. So yes, there were Christians who called them heretics. And so they said, heresy was inspired by Satan, by the demons. So you're just teaching stuff that devils have taught you, that Satan taught you. You're as bad as those other people, or you're worse. So yes, they use that. And then, Catholics and Protestants, right, in the history of Europe, were killing each other in the religious wars. They were burning at the stake, Catholics burning Protestants at the stake for translating the Bible into English, Protestants burning Catholics at the stake. I mean, it was a life and death battle because those people are evil and we are God's people. Both sides saying the same thing.
So technically everybody's Satan and everybody's on the right side from their own perspective.
It works that way. See, if you just say good and evil, then don't you think you're the good one?
I like to think so.
Well, so does everybody else.
Right.
And I've been called in certain circles, which you will understand, Elaine Pagan.
Oh, wow.
And people I didn't know this, but on some websites, that's what they call me. They say she's not really a Christian. And another professor in Atlanta at a theological seminary told students at Princeton when we were talking that I was trying to destroy the church because I'm teaching things that are contrary to church teaching.
What, if you could comment on that, what would you say to that person? Like, you're trying to factually present that there are more than one representatives, like you did on the show. I got to pull it up again. Here we are, right? On this, in this conversation. Oh, am I in the right one? Maybe I went to the wrong one. No.
If you have to go into the one with Stephen Colbert.
Did I exit it? I might have exited. Nope. Here it is. Okay, there it is. So in this particular interview you did with Stephen,
that's with Stephen. Yeah, that was funny.
That was hilarious. But you also mentioned, look, ultimately, this tells us there were various forms of Christianity, and yours is just the authoritarian one, the one that won out in history.
Right.
And I ask everybody to go check your website out for sure. But
it's funny.
How do we know what came first? Like, how do we know which version of Christianity actually is the most original? Or, you know what I mean?
It's a hard question. I mean, Bart Ehrman will tell you that it's proto-orthodoxy, but he's just claiming that the Orthodox horse won the race. So the ones that support that point of view are the racehorse to check, right? There were Christian groups all over the known world, from Africa to Egypt to what is now Britain and France and Spain and Iran and Africa. And they developed different ways of understanding the gospel. Wow. Because some of them had only one gospel to read. Some of them only read Matthew. Some of them only read Mark. Some of them, who knows? Some of them probably didn't read and they heard preachers preach. Somebody probably like Paul.
Some of these other letters too that you've been reading that you have in the Gnostic letters.
And so there were many different versions of the Christian truth. That's why you have to claim that there's a straight thinking way to approach this. And we have it. Right.
We all have it. Everybody's right and everybody's wrong. Well, I ask everyone right now, please go down in the description. I'm telling you, if you're like wanting the book, it's not expensive. Go on Amazon, get her book. Also on Audible, the person that reads it does a